Hello, parishioners. Father Mark now also speaking on day 27 about the book of Leviticus. We're also beginning another book. We're going to hear also Father Michael Schmitz will read from this book, which, again, most people skip it because it's got all of these laws, these Levitical laws, the laws of the Levite priests who were kind of in charge of the sacrifices and prayers around the tabernacle tent that the Jewish people, the Israelites, had in the desert while they were escaping. So it's the same similar time frame as the book of Exodus, and so that's why it's very appropriate that we're going through it and hearing about it now. But I'd just like to speak about it a little bit. Again, the scholars sometimes, when I was in the seminary, they would kind of say that it was written a lot later, but recently, there's a lot of Catholic scholars who are saying that this really looks like stories that could only apply to this situation where they were still back there in the desert and they were just leaving Egypt and they were walking around and getting to Mount Sinai, and then the 10 Commandments were written on stone tablets, and then they had these tablets in a box called the Ark, and they're carrying this Ark around, this box, and it's all about that. It really is all about that Ark that was in a tent, and the people camped around it, the camp, the encampment, and everything that happens. And so they say that, for example, they would go out and hunt, or they would raise animals, and any animal that was going to be killed for food, the rule in the beginning, first chapter, is that it would have to be offered on an altar at the tabernacle tent, right in front of this ark, which was considered to be the presence of God, and that would have been very impractical later on, after they settled in the Holy Land or after the exile to Babylon. All these later dates. The whole situation of the book of Leviticus is this sort of campground setting, and they still have the Ark. The Ark was lost later on. The Ark was after the 6th century BC. The Ark was completely lost, and so this must have been even older. This whole story is very, very ancient, probably 1,000 years before Christ. It's very ancient writing, and it seems boring, maybe, this book of Leviticus, but we're going to find out that really, the more you learn about it, the more you find that it is quite fascinating. We know that the Israelites have just left Egypt and they had to escape from Pharaoh and his army, and it was quite frightening. The Egyptians, when the Pharaoh would go on a war mission, they would carry him on a dais, kind of a throne with 2 poles holding him up. And they believed that he was God. They believed that he was a divine figure. And so it's very interesting that the Israelites, when they get the 2 tablets of God's word, they don't have God, but they have his words, and they put it in a box, and this is the Ark of the Covenant, and they carry it around, and they believe that on this box, they call it the mercy seat, that God's presence has, descends upon it, and several times, this glorious cloud would descend upon it and fill the tent and all those things. So it's considered to be, carrying God around with them. God was with them, and that's what we're going to see in the book of Exodus, the book of Leviticus, this beautiful image of carrying God with them on their journey. You can find on the internet pictures of the encampment of Israel at Mount Sinai and how they spent actually several years there after Moses went up Mount Sinai and got the 10 Commandments. And they have tents. The 12 tribes were in tents all around. And but gradually it says that the Levites were given a sort of a priority to take care of the tabernacle tent and the Holy of Holies, they called it, the place behind the inside the tent where this Ark of the Covenant was kept. And so the 12 tribes not all of them could have immediate access. There was kind of already the beginning of this sort of protection. There was a kind of a protection, or they didn't have immediate access to the presence of God, but this priestly tribe, the Levites, the Levitical people, they were in charge of guarding the tabernacle in the presence of God and letting people come in and arranging and offering the sacrifices on behalf of the people. So that's what we have in the book of Leviticus. A very important thing to know, as Father Schmitz says, is that there's three things in the book of Leviticus that can help you understand the whole book of Leviticus. And the three things are three changes. Three things that change in the life of the people of Israel. And I've kind of arranged them to say that, Father Schmitz and Jeff Cavins say that there are three things: are the priesthood and the tabernacle and the law. But I'd like to maybe say that you could think of it with three T's. The three changes that happen for the people of Israel. The first one is transition of the priesthood to the Levites. In other words, earlier, every patriarch, every head of each tribe, each family could offer prayers and sacrifices to God. But the transition, the change was that there arose a priesthood. Just this one tribe, the Levites, were the ones that were going to be, doing most of the interceding on behalf of the rest of the people. So kind of a laicization. The 11 tribes become like lay people, and the one tribe becomes a priestly people. Of course, later it's a symbol of Jesus, because Jesus is the one high priest who goes, into the tabernacle of heaven and intercedes for us with his own blood. So that's what starts to happen. It's a patriarchal society, but it used to be every patriarch, every father would be a priest, but now it's going to be just certain men would be priests. So the first T is transition of priesthood to the Levites. The second T is the tabernacle, this tent, which was what they would carry with them and pitch it. And, as they journeyed for 40 years through the desert, God was traveling with them, tabernacling with them. He pitched his tent among them, you could say. The third T is Torah. The first 5 books of the Bible, sometimes called the Torah or the law. The Torah law for the Israelites, again, as Father Schmitz says, it's not to punish them so much as to discipline them as a loving father wants to discipline his children. And so all of these three things, these three changes, were for the good of his people, that God wanted them to be his own chosen people. As the book of Leviticus begins, it just starts right in with all kinds of laws about how to offer sacrifice, how the Levites were supposed to do sacrifices. The first 6 chapters of the book of Leviticus refer more to how the people, laws of sacrifice for the people, what the people were supposed to do. And then the next few chapters, chapter 6, verse 8 through chapter 7, those are laws of sacrifice for the priests, or how the priests were to do things. So that's how the first part of the book of Leviticus is organized. And also, chapter 1 that we're reading today, the first chapter, is about one of the kinds of offerings or sacrifices that the Jewish people would make. And there were 5 different kinds. Burnt offerings, which is what we read about today, where the whole animal is burned up to be a pleasing offering to God. That's when you really want to seek God's favor or atone for sins in general. Then there were cereal offerings, when you offered like flour or wheat or bread. There were peace offerings, which involved a communion meal. There were sin offerings, which were required if you wanted to atone for they say, unwitting sins, sins like venial sins that you didn't really know. You don't know exactly, you don't remember all of them, you just in general. Then there were guilt offerings. That's the fifth one. That was mandatory to atone for intentional sins. If there's some like mortal sin that you had, then you did a guilt offering. So that's what we're going to hear about. And the first chapter is just about those burnt offerings. And first it describes how to do a burnt offering from your herd, which is, your cattle or larger animals. And then the second section, starting in verse 10, is if you're offering a burnt offering from your flock, and that's sheep or goats, a little bit smaller animals. And it's going to go through, and then it goes to verse 14. If it's a burnt offering, if someone's poor, they just offer a bird, and it describes how to sacrifice a bird. But these different kinds of animals are listed in order, descending order of economic value. So, the more, if you have a big sin, you have to offer a cow or a steer. But if you have smaller sins, maybe just a goat or a sheep, or if you're poor, you can offer a couple of turtle doves. This is what is described in the first chapter of Leviticus.